The dining room was almost full when he saw her. Not because she was loud, not because she was causing a problem, because she was completely still. An older woman, corner table, a cup of tea in front of her, untouched, steam rising in a thin line, her hands pressed flat against each other on the table, shaking. He was not assigned to her table. He went anyway, brought water, sat beside her when she almost fell, went to the kitchen and came back with food she had not asked for, stayed until she was steady. His manager saw all of it. So did she. What nobody in that dining room knew, what he could not have known, was that the woman in the worn green coat sitting alone with cold tea was not who she appeared to be. And in 3 weeks, his entire life would prove it. Devonte Reese had been on his feet for 11 hours. That was not unusual. Not for him. He had been doing this long enough that his body had stopped complaining and started just accepting it. The ache in his lower back, the tightness behind his knees, the way his left shoulder locked up around the 9th hour, like it was trying to send him a message he never had time to read. Ember Grill was loud tonight. It was always loud on Wednesday evenings, which made no sense to him because Wednesday was not the weekend, Wednesday was not payday, Wednesday was just Wednesday. But the tables were full, and the kitchen was behind, and the hostess had already seated 3 parties past capacity, and nobody had asked him if that was a good idea. Nobody ever asked. He moved through the dining room the way water moves through a narrow channel. Fast, precise, no wasted motion. 2 plates balanced on his left forearm, 1 in his right hand, eyes already scanning the next table before he had finished setting down the current one. Table 7 needed a refill. Table 12 had been waiting on their appetizers for 22 minutes. The couple at table 4 had stopped talking to each other entirely, which meant they were either very comfortable or very done, and either way they would be asking for the check soon. He knew this dining room the way he knew his own apartment. Every corner, every draft from the back door, every table that wobbled if you set a full tray down too hard. 4 years. He had been here 4 years. That was not something he was proud of exactly. It was just a fact. The kind of fact that sits in the back of your mind and does not announce itself but is always there, always counting. He had not planned to be here 4 years. He had not planned most of the last 12 years if he was being honest. Plans had a way of dissolving when life decided it had other ideas. And life had decided, loudly, permanently, a Tuesday morning in October, when a phone call changed everything that came after it. But he did not think about that at work. He had rules about that. The kitchen bell rang. He turned and went. Roland Mack was standing near the service station when Devonte came back through with an empty tray. Roland was always standing somewhere, watching, which was the thing about Roland that Devonte had never fully made peace with. The man managed like he was waiting for someone to fail. Hands clasped behind his back, eyes moving, mouth already forming the beginning of a correction before the mistake had even finished happening. Table 9's been waiting on dessert menus, Roland said. Not a question. Not quite an accusation. That middle space Roland liked to live in. I'll get them now. You should have gotten them 3 minutes ago. Devonte did not respond to that. He had learned a long time ago that responding to Roland's arithmetic was a trap. The man kept score of things that had not happened yet and expected apologies for them in advance. Devonte picked up the dessert menus, turned and walked. He was good at walking away from things that were not worth his time. He had a lot of practice. The dining room had that particular Wednesday's energy. Now the hum of overlapping conversations, the scrape of the low music that was always turned up just slightly too loud for the room. He delivered the dessert menus, smiled at the couple at table 9, who were celebrating something involving a small balloon tied to the woman's chair, refilled the water at table 7, checked on the family at table 11, whose toddler had been systematically destroying a paper napkin for the past 40 minutes. He liked the work. That was the honest truth. The part he never said out loud because it would sound like settling. Like he had given up and learned to be grateful for whatever was left. But it was not that. He genuinely liked the rhythm of a busy dining room. The way a good service felt like music when everything was moving right. The way a table full of strangers could become, for 90 minutes, a little world that he helped hold together. He just wished it paid enough to matter. The numbers ran through his head the way they always did. They never stopped running. It was like a calculator had been installed somewhere behind his left eye, and it never fully powered down. Aldric's tuition, second semester, due in 6 weeks, rent, due in 12 days. The transmission on his car that had been making a sound for 3 months now, a sound he kept deciding to deal with later, because later was cheaper than now. His current hourly rate multiplied by his current weekly hours came to a number that covered most of it. Most, not all. There was a gap. There was always a gap. And the gap had a way of growing when he was not paying attention, like something alive that fed on the moments when he was too tired to watch it. He had asked Roland 2 weeks ago about picking up a third shift. Sunday mornings were slow. He could handle the setup, run the early tables, be out by 2. It was not complicated. Roland had said he would look into it. That was 2 weeks ago. Devonte had not asked again. He had his dignity. It was not worth much in dollar terms, but he kept it anyway. He was clearing the plates from table 6 when he saw her. Not because she was loud. Not because she was causing a problem. It was the opposite of that. It was the stillness of her that caught his eye. The way she was just sitting there, not moving, not looking at her phone, not doing any of the things people did when they were alone in a restaurant waiting for someone. Just sitting, hands folded on the table, eyes on the window. She was older, 70 maybe, 75. Wearing a dark green coat that had been washed so many times, the color had gone soft at the elbows. A small handbag on the table beside her, the kind made of fake leather that had started to crack at the corners. Her shoes were canvas, the kind you could buy at a discount store for $12. There was a cup of tea in front of her, untouched, steam rising from it in a thin, patient line. Her hands were shaking, not dramatically, not the kind of shaking that made people look over, just a fine, constant tremor that she was clearly trying to control, both hands pressed flat against each other like she was holding something closed. Devonte looked at the table number 6, 12. No, she was at the corner table between sections. Table 15, which technically belonged to Gina, who was currently dealing with a complicated split-check situation at the other end of the room. Not his table. He turned back to his section. He made it 3 steps. Stopped. Turned. Back around. She had not moved. The tea had not moved. And there was something about the way she was sitting that he recognized in a way he could not have fully explained. The careful stillness of someone who was working very hard to appear fine, who had decided that fine was the only option and was committing to it completely. He knew that posture. He had worn it himself for years. He picked up a glass of water from the service station and walked over. "Good evening, ma'am." He kept his voice easy, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world, which he absolutely did not. "Just wanted to check if you needed anything." She looked up at him. Her eyes were dark brown and very clear, sharp, even. The kind of eyes that had been paying attention to things for a long time and had gotten good at it. "I'm fine, thank you," she said. Her voice was steady, practiced. He set the water down beside her tea. "You've got good timing. Wednesday evenings are always worth the wait." He glanced at the menu, still closed. "Have you had a chance to look at anything? Or are you still deciding?" "Still deciding." A small pause. "I may just have the tea." He nodded. Did not push. "Whenever you're ready." He started to turn. "Young man." He stopped. She was looking at him with an expression he could not quite name. Not quite gratitude. Something more careful than that. Like she was calculating something and had not finished yet. "Thank you," she said, "for stopping." He nodded once more, then went back to his tables. Roland was watching from the service station. Devonte did not look directly at him. He did not need to. He could feel the weight of that gaze the same way you feel weather changing. A pressure shift. The atmosphere adjusting around something that was about to happen. "That's Gina's table," Roland said when Devonte came close enough. "She's managing a split check. I just brought water." "We don't need you managing Gina's section." "I brought water, Roland. I need you on your own tables. 14 and 16 are both waiting." Devonte went to 14 and 16. He did not argue. Arguing with Roland was a specific kind of exhausting that he had decided long ago was not worth the metabolic cost. The man had a gift for making small things feel like federal crimes. and large things feel like personal attacks. You did not debate that. You just moved around it. But he kept an eye on the corner table. He was not sure why. Or maybe he was sure, and just did not want to examine it too closely. There was something about that woman that had lodged itself in the back of his attention and would not let go. 20 minutes passed. He watched her between tables. She had not touched the tea, had not opened the menu, had not looked at her phone because there was no phone visible, just the hands, still shaking, the slight movement of her chest as she breathed, the occasional glance toward the window, like she was checking something outside that was not there. Gina finally made it to the corner table. Devonte watched the interaction from across the room, saw Gina lean over to take the order, pause, ask something. Saw the woman shake her head. Gina wrote something down, straightened, came back past him. She just wants the tea, Gina said under her breath. She's been sitting there with that cold tea for 30 minutes. I don't know what she's waiting for. Neither did Devonte. But something was wrong. He could feel it. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way he could point to and describe to Roland using words that specify Roland's particular brand of logic. Just a low, certain hum of wrongness. The same instinct that made him check on Aldric when the boy went quiet for too long. The same thing that made him pull over once on a highway because a car ahead of him was drifting and he needed to see what happened next. He finished his rotation. Checked on table 14. 14 was fine. Table 12 needed more bread. He went to get the bread. When he came back through, the woman was standing, or trying to stand. She had one hand pressed flat on the table, and she was pushing herself upright, slowly, with the particular careful movement of someone who knew their body, had opinions about vertical, and was negotiating with it. The shaking in her hands had spread. Her face had gone pale under the warm brown of her skin. Her lips were pressed together in a tight line. Devonte was moving before he had made a decision to move. He got there in 4 steps. He reached her just as her knees started to go, his hand coming under her elbow, his body shifting to give her something solid to lean into without making a performance of it. He did not grab. He did not make a fuss. Just steadied her. She exhaled, a long, slow breath that sounded like it had been held for some time. "I've got you," he said quietly. "Take your time." She did not say anything for a moment. Just breathed. Her hand found his forearm and held it. Her grip was stronger than he expected. "I'm all right," she said. The words were automatic. He did not believe them. "I know," he said. "Just take a second." He lowered her back into the chair carefully, kept one hand on her shoulder until she was settled, and her breathing had steadied. Then he pulled the adjacent chair around and sat down beside her, not across, not at a professional distance, just beside her, like a person. "Have you eaten anything today?" he asked. A pause. "This morning." It was nearly 8 in the evening. He stood without making a production of it. Went to the kitchen. Came back 8 minutes later with a small bowl of grits, soft and buttered the way he knew how to make them from years in kitchens, a side of soft rolls and a fresh cup of tea. He set it in front of her. Kitchen had some extra, he said, which was not entirely true, but close enough. She looked at the food, then at him. Something moved behind her eyes. Not quite surprise, something older than surprise. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know." He left her to eat. He had tables. He had always had tables. But Roland had seen all of it. Devonte knew before he turned around. The specific quality of Roland's silence was different from the ambient noise of the restaurant. There was a shape to it, a temperature. Devonte, not loud. Roland never needed to be loud. He walked over. "What was that?" Roland said. She almost fainted. I steadied her and got her something to eat. "That is not your table." She needed help. "You have 4 tables that need attention. 4 tables that are paying customers who have been waiting while you..." Roland gestured toward the corner with something that was almost contempt. "While you play nurse over there." Devonte breathed once. Slow. "She's a paying customer." She ordered tea. 1 tea. "She has been sitting in that corner for 45 minutes nursing 1 tea, and you just comped her an entire..." "I'll pay for it myself." Roland stopped. That had surprised him. "Good. That is not the point," Roland said, recovering. "This is the 2nd time this month you have deviated from your assigned section to assist customers outside your zone. The Hendricks situation 2 weeks ago. Mr. Hendricks was lost. He was 70 years old and he couldn't find the restroom and he was embarrassed about it. I walked him there. That took 4 minutes. 4 minutes on a Friday night is 4 minutes. Devonte kept his voice flat. Not angry. Flat. Because angry would give Roland exactly what Roland wanted, which was a reason. I kept my tables covered, both times. Nothing fell apart. Nothing burned. No one complained. Roland straightened his jacket. That was the tell. The small adjustment. The way he gathered himself before delivering something he had already decided. This is your second formal warning this month, Roland said. Third warning results in termination. Company policy. Devonte looked at him for a long moment. Long enough to let Roland understand that he had heard the words and was filing them in the appropriate place. Then he turned and went back to his tables. He did not look at the corner again. He focused on table 14, on table 16, on the couple at table 9, who had just flagged him for more sparkling water. He was efficient. He was professional. He completed his rotation with exactly the kind of performance that Roland could not find a single thing to note on paper. But inside the careful stillness he had built around himself, something was pulling tight. A wire slowly winching. The way financial pressure always felt in his body. Not pain. Not yet. Just tension. Just the awareness of how thin the margin was and how many things were balanced on it. He was walking past the service station an hour later when Gina caught his arm. She leaned close and said something low and quick. He almost missed it. She asked about you, Gina said. The lady in the corner, before she left, asked what your name was. He looked up. The corner table was empty now. The food was gone. A $20 bill had been placed neatly beneath the edge of the teacup. He did not think much of it. People asked about servers sometimes. Wanted to leave a good comment, or a complaint, or occasionally just curiosity. It was part of the job. The public-facing part that reminded him that strangers watched you while you worked, formed opinions, moved on. He pocketed the 20 toward Gina's section and went back to his rotation. The rest of the shift moved the way shifts moved when they had already decided to be long. Table by table, round by round. The restaurant gradually emptying, as the evening wore into something quieter, the kitchen sounds dying down, the music becoming suddenly too present without the cover of crowd noise. He was wiping down table 12 when Roland appeared one final time. Devonte saw it before Roland said a word. The clipboard was not a good sign. The clipboard meant paperwork. Paperwork meant something had already been decided, and this was just the formality of announcing it. I reviewed the situation tonight with the assistant manager, Roland said, and I've reviewed your file. He held the clipboard like it was evidence. 2 formal warnings in 1 month. The policy is clear. Devonte put the cloth down slowly. I'm removing you from the schedule effective tonight, Roland said. You can collect your final check on Friday. The dining room was almost empty now. 2 tables left. A young couple in the back who were not paying attention to anything except each other. The busboy moving through the far section with a cart. The low music. Everything very still. Very quiet. Devonte looked at Roland for a moment. Just looked. Not with anger. Not with the collapse of something breaking. Just with the kind of clarity that comes when you have been waiting for a thing to happen. And it finally does, and the waiting is over. He reached behind himself, untied the apron, folded it carefully, the way he always did, with the strings tucked in and the front panel flat. Set it on the service station counter. Okay, he said. He went to the locker room, changed his shoes, got his jacket, checked his phone out of habit, which showed him 3 messages from a group chat he had not responded to in weeks and nothing else. He went out the back way, past the dumpsters, into the parking lot, into the November air that hit him like something honest after the recycled warmth of the dining room. His car was where it always was. 4th space from the end. The back left tire that he kept meaning to get looked at. The small crack in the passenger window that had been there since July and had stopped getting worse. And so had become just part of the car, just part of things. He got in, did not start the engine, just sat there in the dark with his hands in his lap and the city making its sounds around him. He ran the numbers. It was automatic. He could not stop it if he wanted to. His brain went straight to the spreadsheet that lived in the back of his head. the one that was always running, always adjusting. 6 weeks to Aldric's tuition. Rent in 12 days, the transmission. His current savings, he held the number in his mind and looked at it without flinching, which took practice. His current savings covered maybe 3 weeks of normal expenses, if he found another job within that time. 3 weeks was not a lot. 3 weeks was also not nothing. He had worked with less before. He had built more than this from less than this, and he knew what it cost, and he was willing to pay it again. That part he was not afraid of. What he was afraid of, or not afraid exactly, but what sat in his chest like something heavy, was Aldric. Aldric did not know. Aldric could not know, not yet. Maybe not at all, if Devonte could move fast enough and smart enough and get something locked up before the timeline got close. His son was 20 years old and in his second year of college, and the only reason any of that was possible was 12 years of double shifts and skipped vacations, and one Saturday afternoon 8 years ago, when Devonte had sold the guitar he had owned since he was 19 because it was a luxury and groceries were not. He had not told Aldric about the guitar. He never would. His phone lit up. Aldric. A message, not a call. "You good tonight? Haven't heard from you." He looked at the message for a long time. Then he typed, "Yeah, running late. Eat without me. I'll be home soon." He sent it. Put the phone face down on the passenger seat. Outside the car, a couple walked through the parking lot laughing about something. The sound of it, carrying clean and light through the cold air. He watched them go. 2 people who had no idea what the night felt like from where he was sitting, who were not unkind, who were just somewhere else entirely. He breathed. In through the nose. 4 counts. Out through the mouth. 4 counts. This was the thing about pressure. Real pressure. Not dramatic pressure. Not the movie version where everything swells and turns cinematic. Real pressure was quiet. It was sitting in a parked car in a parking lot where everyone had already gone home. Running arithmetic in your head that never came out even. Making your face do the right things so your son did not worry. He was 32 years old. He had been doing this alone for 12 years. He picked up the phone again, looked at Aldric's message, looked at his own response. "Fine. We're fine." Then he put it down, started the car, and pulled out of the parking lot. The drive home took 14 minutes. He knew every light, every shortcut, every block of this city that had become so familiar it had stopped being a city and started being just the specific shape of his life, the walls of it, the texture. He passed the block where the old community center used to be, before it was converted to condominiums. He passed the diner where he used to take Aldric on Saturday mornings, back when Aldric was small enough to need a booster seat and old enough to have opinions about pancakes. He passed the street corner where his old friend Tobias had stood every Tuesday evening for a year, trying to get signatures for a petition about the bus schedule, and Devonte had always stopped and signed and listened even when he was tired. He had always stopped. That was the thing, wasn't it? He had always stopped. When someone needed something, and he could help, and helping cost him something he wasn't entirely sure he could spare. He had always looked at that equation and arrived at the same answer, because that was who he was, and he had decided a long time ago that who you were was not negotiable based on the cost. He just wished the cost would stop being so high. The apartment building was quiet. 3rd floor. The elevator that worked most of the time. Down the hallway with the flickering light near apartment 12 that the building manager kept promising to fix. He unlocked the door. The apartment was dim. Aldric's light was on under his door, the soft amber glow of it leaking into the dark living room. On the kitchen counter, there was a plate covered with a paper towel and a note written on a torn piece of notebook paper. "Made the rice thing. Yours is in the fridge. Don't skip it." Devonte stood in the kitchen and read that note 3 times. Don't skip it. His 20-year-old son, who had exactly no idea that his father had spent the last 4 years skipping his own meals when things got tight, had left him a note that said don't skip it. He put the note down. He opened the fridge and took out the plate. He sat down at the kitchen table in the dark and ate slowly, without turning on the light. He did not think about Roland. He did not think about the apron folded on the service station counter. He thought about what he had told himself years ago, in a hospital waiting room, while a doctor was delivering news that would permanently reroute his life. He had sat in that plastic chair and told himself one thing only. You keep going. Whatever it takes, you keep going for him. He had kept going. He would keep going again. Outside, the city did what cities do at night. It breathed and moved and hummed with its million invisible lives. Inside, a man ate leftover rice in the dark and did not let himself come apart. Because coming apart was a luxury he had never once been able to afford. Tomorrow would come. He would be ready for it. That was all. That was enough for now. Loretta Voss did not go straight home. That was the first thing. She did not go straight home, which was unusual for her, because Loretta was a woman who had spent the better part of 74 years going straight to where she was supposed to go and doing what she was supposed to do and not making a production of either. She was efficient. She was direct. She did not linger. But she lingered tonight. She sat in the back of the car, her own car, the one she insisted on calling the sedan, even though Simone kept calling it the town car, because Simone had opinions about everything, including vehicle nomenclature, and she looked out the window at Ember Grill as they pulled away. The lights inside were warm and amber. Through the glass she could still see the movement of the dining room. Servers moving, tables filling and emptying the way tides do. The ordinary machinery of a busy restaurant on an ordinary Wednesday night. Somewhere in there, a man named Devonte Reese was finishing his shift, or so she assumed. She did not know yet that he was not finishing his shift. She did not know yet what had happened after she left. But she would find out. That was already decided, even if she had not said it out loud to herself yet. Loretta had a way of deciding things before she announced them, even to her own interior voice. The decision arrived first, quiet and complete, and the understanding of it came after. She had already decided about Devonte Reese. The drive to the penthouse took 20 minutes through Wednesday evening traffic. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, steadier. Now, the tremor quieted by the food and the water, and the simple act of having been steadied by someone who had not been asked to steady her. That was the part she kept returning to. He had not been asked. He had not been flagged down or signaled or given any visible cue that she needed help. He had just seen it. From across a crowded dining room, in the middle of a shift, juggling 4 other tables and a manager who looked like he catalogued infractions for sport. He had just seen it, and he had come. Loretta had been doing this for 3 years now, visiting places without announcing who she was, wearing the coat, the canvas shoes, carrying the bag that had started its life as something her housekeeper used before Loretta quietly appropriated it for exactly this purpose, sitting in restaurants and hotel lobbies and doctors' waiting rooms and bus stations, dressed like someone who had been passed over, ignored, underestimated, and watching what happened, who stopped, who looked through her, who adjusted their behavior based entirely on what they assumed she could and could not offer them in return. In 3 years, she had sat in 41 different establishments. In 41 establishments, 7 people had stopped without being directly asked. 7 people. In 3 years. Devonte Reese was the only one who had come back a second time. She thought about that while the city moved past the car window, the way he had returned with the food, not making a ceremony of it, not waiting for her gratitude or her acknowledgement. Just placing the bowl in front of her and saying the kitchen had extra and turning around and going back to work. Like it was nothing. Like it was just the obvious next thing to do. The obvious next thing. She could count on one hand the number of people in her life who operated that way, who saw what needed doing and did it without calculating the return. The car pulled up to the building. She thanked the driver, took the elevator to the top floor, walked through the front door of the penthouse and set her bag down and sat in the chair by the window, the one that faced the city, the one she had sat in for years to think, and she called Simone. 3 rings. Then, Mama, I need you to do something for me. A pause. Are you all right? You were supposed to check in at 6. I'm fine. I had a longer evening than I planned, but I need you to do something. She folded her hands. There's a restaurant on Carver Street. Ember Grill, there's a server there. His name is Devonte Reese. I need you to find out everything about him. Silence on the other end of the line. Not a confused silence. A very specific kind of silence that Loretta recognized because she had raised the woman producing it. Mama. Simone's voice was careful. Did you go out again? Without telling me. I go out regularly. I am 74 years old, not 7. You know what I mean. I do know what you mean, Loretta said. And yes, I went to the restaurant on Carver Street. I wore the coat. And before you say whatever you're about to say, you're testing people again. I am observing people. There is a difference. Mama, Simone. Her voice was gentle, but it had that quality, that particular weight, that had stopped arguments since Simone was 9 years old. Not anger. Just certainty. I didn't go looking for anyone tonight. I went in and I ordered tea and I was sitting there, and I had one of my episodes. She paused. Let that land. A small one. My hands. And I almost lost my footing when I stood. The silence changed. You had an episode. A small one, and you were alone. I am often alone, that's the point. She looked out at the city lights. But this man, this server, he saw me from across the room, Simone. He was not assigned to my table. He came anyway. Brought me water. When I almost fell, he was there before I finished falling. He sat with me. He got food from the kitchen without making me ask for it. She breathed once. And then his manager fired him. Tonight, while I was still there. For helping me. Another silence. Longer this time. He was fired, Simone said. For helping me, Loretta said. She heard her daughter breathe. She heard the sound of Simone's office, the low hum of that building at night, the climate control, the particular acoustics of 30 floors of glass and steel. She knew that office. She had sat in it many times, had watched her daughter become something extraordinary, and occasionally something a little too much, which was a different problem for a different conversation. I'll have someone look into it, Simone said finally. I'll need more than a background check. I know what you need, Mama. A pause. Something that might have been almost a smile in the voice. I'll handle it. Loretta hung up, looked out at the city for a while longer. Then she got up, made herself a proper cup of tea, and went to bed. She slept better than she had in weeks. Devonte's Thursday started with the calculator. It always started with the calculator now. He had not turned it into a ritual intentionally, it had become one without his permission. He woke up, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and ran the numbers. Not because he wanted to, because not knowing was worse than knowing. Because the gap between what he had and what he needed was something he could manage as long as he could see it clearly. It was only when he stopped looking that it got dangerous. The numbers were not good. They were not catastrophic. Not yet. He had enough to cover rent and keep Aldric fed for approximately 3 weeks if he was careful. 3 weeks was workable if something came through. 3 weeks was a problem if nothing did. He had applied to 4 places already. The night before, from his phone, sitting at the kitchen table after Aldric had gone to sleep. A hotel on the east side that was advertising for banquet staff. A catering company downtown that had a listing for experienced servers. A restaurant on the north end that was expanding its evening service. A private dining club that he knew paid well and hired selectively, but occasionally had openings. He had sent 4 professional, clean, clearly worded applications. Then he had gone to sleep. Then he had woken up and run the numbers again. Aldric was in the kitchen when Devonte came out of his room, pouring coffee. Already dressed, already looking like he was running slightly late for something, which was Aldric's default state in the morning. The boy had inherited his mother's relationship with time, or rather her absence of relationship with time, her complete and cheerful indifference to its demands. Morning, Aldric said. He held up the coffee pot. An offer. I've got it. Devonte poured his own, sat down. Aldric leaned against the counter, looking at him, which Devonte noticed, but did not address directly. You came in late last night, Aldric said. Had some things to sort out. You eat the rice? I ate the rice. It was good, right? Not a question. Aldric had his mother's confidence in the kitchen too. Another inheritance. I figured out the seasoning situation. The problem before was I was adding the garlic too early. It was good, Devonte agreed. Aldric looked at him for another moment. This was the thing about Aldric. The boy had always been able to read him. Even as a small child, 6, 7 years old, he had a radar for Devonte's moods that was unnerving in its accuracy. He never pushed, just noticed, and Devonte was never entirely sure whether that was a gift or a burden the boy carried. Okay, Aldric said, and turned back to his coffee. That was it. That was the whole exchange. And somehow it was exactly right, and also quietly unbearable, because Devonte was sitting at the kitchen table with a 3-week runway and an empty schedule, and his son was 2 feet away asking him no questions, because he trusted his father completely, and that trust was something Devonte would do literally anything to protect. Aldric left for class. Devonte heard the door, the lock, the footsteps down the hall. Then silence. He opened his laptop. He sent 3 more applications. Then he made another cup of coffee and sat down and started thinking seriously about what came next. The first rejection came at 11:17. The catering company. A form response. Thank you for your interest. We have reviewed your application. We will keep your information on file. The language of no. He filed it and moved on. The second rejection came at 2:43. The hotel. Same language. Different email template. He filed that one too. The banquet staff listing on the east side had not responded at all, which might mean nothing and might mean something. And he had learned over the years not to read too much into silence, because silence was not data. Silence was just silence. The private dining club had not responded either. By Friday morning he had sent 11 applications. By Friday afternoon he had 3 rejections and 8 silences. By Friday evening he understood something that he had been trying not to understand since Wednesday night. Roland had done something to his file. He did not know this for certain. He could not prove it. But he had been in the service industry long enough to know how it worked, the informal network of it, the phone calls that happened before interviews, the conversations between managers that never left a paper trail, but absolutely shaped what came next for the person being discussed. He had seen it happen to other people. He had never thought it would happen to him because he had never given anyone a reason. Apparently, helping a woman stay upright was a reason. He called the private dining club on Friday afternoon, got as far as the hiring manager's assistant. The assistant asked where he was coming from. He said, Ember Grill. There was a pause, a very small pause, the kind that was not quite long enough to be meaningful but was slightly too long to be neutral. Then the assistant said they were not currently hiring for his level of experience, and thanked him for his interest. He hung up, stood in his kitchen for a moment. Then he picked up his keys and drove to the library, because the library had printing surfaces and he needed physical copies of his resume, and the library also had the quality of silence he needed right now, the kind that was not empty, but purposeful, that was made of many people being quiet in the same place for different reasons, which felt less lonely than the apartment. He printed 15 copies, used good paper, went home. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, more applications, more silence. One phone interview that went reasonably well, and then went nowhere, which was its own particular kind of hope-adjacent disappointment that he had learned to metabolize quickly. He found himself at the grocery store on Sunday afternoon, with $47 and a mental list that he was editing in real time, walking through the aisles and making the small calculations that people who have never had to make them do not think about, and people who have cannot turn off, the good chicken or the store brand, the name brand cereal that Aldric liked, or the bag cereal that tasted like someone had described cereal to someone who had never seen cereal. He stood in front of the cereal aisle for longer than was reasonable. He got the bag cereal. He also got the chicken, because some things were not negotiable. On the drive home he stopped at a red light and looked at his own hands on the steering wheel and thought, this is manageable. This is a problem with a solution. I have solved problems before. I will solve this one. The light turned green. He drove. He did not tell Aldric. He kept not telling Aldric. Each morning Aldric came out of his room, and they had coffee together and talked about ordinary things a class Aldric was behind in, a friend's situation that Aldric was navigating, a documentary they had both been meaning to watch. And each morning Devonte sat across from his son and said everything was fine and meant it in the way that you can mean something, and also know it is not exactly true at the same time. He was a good father. He was not a dishonest father. He just understood the difference between information that helped and information that waited. On Tuesday morning, 11 days after he had been fired, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost let it go to voicemail. He had been getting calls from numbers he did not recognize all week, and most of them turned out to be automated things, scheduling systems, reminder calls for appointments he did not have, but something made him pick up. A small tug of instinct that he could not name. Mr. Reese. A woman's voice. Professional. Not quite formal, but measured. My name is Delphine. I'm calling on behalf of someone who would like to speak with you in person. Are you available tomorrow morning? He processed that sentence carefully. On behalf of who? I'm not able to say over the phone. I can tell you it's related to your recent experience at Ember Grill. A pause. Nothing legal. Nothing to worry about. Someone simply wants to meet you. He almost said no. The whole thing had the texture of something that should be said no to anonymous calls, unexplained requests, the deliberate vagueness that could mean anything from a journalism inquiry to something stranger. He had enough complications already without adding mystery to the list. Who is this person? He asked. Someone who believes they owe you a thank you, Delphine said. He thought about that. He could not think of anyone in his recent life who owed him a thank you specifically. Then he thought about the corner table, the tea, the $20 left neatly under the cup. The woman from the restaurant, he said. A small pause, confirming without confirming. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, I can text you the address. He looked at his calendar, which did not require much looking because it was largely empty. All right, he said. He hung up, stood in his kitchen for a moment. Then he went and ironed a shirt, because whatever this was, he was not showing up wrinkled. The address turned out to be a building on the west side of downtown, glass-fronted, 30 stories, the kind of building that had a lobby with real marble floors and a front desk staffed by 2 people who both looked like they had received specific training in making visitors feel simultaneously welcome and slightly inadequate. He arrived at 9:55 because he was always early. He told the front desk his name. The woman at the desk typed something, looked at something, and smiled in a way that suggested she had been told to expect him. He was taken to the 11th floor, led down a hallway, shown to a small conference room with a window that looked out over the city at an angle that made everything look organized and deliberate, which he suspected the city was not. He sat down, he waited. He was good at waiting. He had practice. The door opened, and there she was, not quite what he expected. Which was what had he expected exactly. The woman from the restaurant, small, old coat, canvas shoes, the careful stillness of someone working hard to appear fine. This woman was the same woman. He recognized her immediately, the dark brown eyes, the particular quality of her attention, that sense of something very alert, operating behind a calm face. But the coat was different, the posture was different. She sat down across from him like someone who had owned every room she had ever walked into, and had simply gotten bored of making a point of it. Mr. Reese, she said. I'm Loretta Voss. He nodded. The woman from the restaurant. Yes, she folded her hands on the table. I want you to know that I heard what happened after I left. I want to say that I am sorry you didn't fire me. No, she said, but I was the occasion for it. And I've been doing this long enough to know that being the occasion for something still carries a weight. She looked at him steadily. How are you managing? He almost said fine. The word was right there, automatic, preloaded. He had said fine approximately 400 times in the past 11 days. I'm working on it, he said instead. She looked at him for a moment. Something in her expression settled, like something she had been considering had just been confirmed. I understand you've been applying for work, she said. He was quiet for a second. I have. And that it hasn't been going well. He breathed once. Did you have my applications pulled? No, she said simply. I know people. People talk. The service industry is smaller than it looks from the outside. She paused. I also know Roland Mack, not personally, but by reputation, and by what tends to happen to the people who leave his staff under certain circumstances. He did not say anything to that, because what she was describing was the thing he had understood without wanting to understand it, and having someone say it out loud made it more real in a way that was both a relief and not. Why are you here? He asked. What is this, exactly? A conversation, she said. About what? She looked at him with those clear, sharp eyes. About what you're going to do next. Before he could respond, the door opened again, and the room changed, not loudly, not dramatically, just shifted. The way a room shifts when something significant enters it. The woman who walked in was not tall. but she moved like height was a decision rather than a measurement. She was wearing a fitted black dress, structured at the shoulders, silk at the hem, the kind of dress that was not trying to announce itself but announced itself anyway. Her hair was straight, silk-pressed, swept back from her face, in a way that was precise without being severe. She was somewhere in her mid-40s, maybe, and she had the bearing of someone who had been the smartest person in most rooms, for long enough that she had stopped needing anyone to confirm it. She sat down beside Loretta, looked at Devonte, did not smile yet. "This is my daughter," Loretta said. "Simone." He looked at Simone Voss. Then, because he could not quite stop himself, he looked at Loretta again. "Voss," he said. "Yes," Loretta said, and in the way a name sometimes lands not just as sound but as recognition. As the click of something previously unconnected it landed. Voss Hospitality. The name was on 3 hotels in the metro area, on 2 developments that had reshaped entire neighborhoods over the past decade, on the kind of business coverage that showed up in actual print, in publications that did not bother with businesses that were not worth covering. He had walked past a Voss property 2 days ago on his way to drop off a physical resume somewhere that had not called him back. He sat very still. "I should go," he said. Both women looked at him. Neither of them moved. "I didn't come here for—" He stopped. Tried again. "I didn't stop to help your mother because I expected something from it. I don't want to be someone's good deed project." Simone spoke for the first time. Her voice was lower than he expected. Direct. Not unkind, but not soft either. "No one said you were." "Then what is this?" "My mother told me what happened. I wanted to see for myself." She looked at him with the same quality of attention Loretta had, but sharper. More evaluating. Like she was running calculations and he was the variable. "She says you kept your composure when you were fired. That you apologized to her before you left. Manners cost nothing." "In my experience," Simone said, "they cost quite a lot, depending on what you're losing at the time." He looked at her. She looked back. Something passed between them that was not quite a challenge and not quite an understanding. Something still being decided. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need a straight answer." "All right," she said. "Is there an actual job here? Or is this a conversation that ends with someone feeling good about themselves for trying?" Loretta pressed her lips together in a way that might have been suppressing something. Simone did not look away. "There's an actual job," she said. "Whether you want it is a different question." He sat back. "Tell me about it." She did. Guest services supervisor at Voss Grand, the flagship hotel on the west side. Not entry level. Not a favor position. A real role with real expectations, managing a team of 12 across 3 shift rotations, handling VIP services, acting as the point of contact for event bookings and special requests. The kind of position that people with more experience than him sometimes applied for and did not get. He listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "Why would you offer me that?" "Because the last person in that role was competent and boring, and left for a corporate position 3 months ago. And competent and boring keeps a hotel running, but doesn't make anyone want to come back." She looked at him evenly. "My mother's seen a lot of people in a lot of situations. She doesn't make phone calls about most of them." He was quiet for a moment, long enough that the silence had texture. "One condition," he said. Simone raised an eyebrow. "Slightly. Just slightly. Nobody at the hotel knows your mother was involved. Nobody knows this conversation happened. I walk in through the same door as everyone else. I go through whatever the actual process is, and I get evaluated on what I do, not on this." He looked at her steadily. "If I can't hold the job on my own, I don't want it." Another silence. Shorter this time. "That's going to make things more complicated," Simone said. I know what you could simply do," he said. "I'm asking you not to." She looked at him, then at her mother. Loretta was looking at the window, the city, everything outside. The picture of someone not influencing an outcome. "All right," Simone said. He stood, extended his hand. She shook it. Her grip was firm and direct, and she met his eyes when she did it, which he noted. "Delphine will send you the formal application," she said. "The interview panel has 3 people. I will not be one of them." He nodded. Loretta stood as he moved toward the door. "Mr. Reese," she said. He turned. "Whatever happens next," she said. with the warmth of someone who meant every syllable. "Thank you. For what you did. It mattered more than you know." He thought about the 11 days, the bag cereal, the ironed shirt, the 4 a.m. mornings when the calculator wouldn't stop running. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me a reason to wear a decent shirt." Loretta laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere genuine. He walked out into the hallway and waited for the elevator and stood there with his hands in his pockets, facing forward, not smiling exactly, but something adjacent to it. Simone Voss was still in the conference room on the phone now, her voice low and precise, the language of someone who was already 6 steps ahead and knew it. He had heard enough in their exchange to understand she was that kind of person. The kind who processed fast and spoke slower than she thought, who let other people reveal their priorities before she revealed hers. He was not entirely sure what to make of her. He was sure that she was not what he had expected, though he was not sure what he had expected. Not someone who shook hands like she meant it. Not someone who looked at him the way she had, not through him, not past him, not with the evaluating look that people sometimes aimed at service workers who had suddenly appeared in spaces they didn't usually occupy. She had looked at him like he was someone worth the full account of her attention. That was unusual enough to be worth noting. The elevator arrived. He got in. On the way down, he thought about what he would tell Aldric, which was nothing yet. Nothing until something was real, because hope was its own kind of weight to carry, and Aldric was already carrying enough. He stepped out into the lobby, thanked the woman at the front desk, who smiled like she had been told something about him that made her want to. Walked out into the afternoon air, stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looked up at the building, 30 floors of glass and intention. Somewhere up there, a woman in a silk-pressed silk hem was making phone calls about his future, and somewhere on the east side, his son was sitting in a class that cost money he did not quite have, learning things that would matter in a future that Devonte was quietly, stubbornly, relentlessly building the scaffolding for. One thing at a time. He turned, started walking toward the parking garage. His phone buzzed. A text from Aldric. "You free for dinner? I found a new rice situation. It involves lemon." He typed back, "I'll be home by 6. Then he put the phone in his pocket and kept walking. The formal application took 4 days to complete. Not because it was complicated, because Devonte did it right. Every section, every reference, every work history entry written with the kind of precision that left no room for interpretation. He had 3 people listed as references: his old culinary instructor from the program he had attended before Aldric's mother died, a catering director he had worked a charity event for 2 years prior, and a senior server from Ember Grill named Claudette, who had worked beside him for 3 years, and who he trusted without reservation, and who had sent him 2 words when he told her what had happened. That's wrong. No punctuation, just the plain fact of it, stated and left to stand. He submitted the application on a Thursday evening, sat at the kitchen table afterward and looked at the confirmation email on his screen, closed the laptop, then opened it again because he had remembered he needed to check something about the Panama Tabal format that Delphine had mentioned. 3 interviewers. Not Simone. He had not asked who the 3 were, because asking would have felt like requesting a preview of the exam, and he did not want a preview. He wanted to walk in clean. The interview was scheduled for the following Wednesday. 6 days. He kept applying elsewhere during those 6 days, because he did not build his survival on single outcomes. Never had. He sent 7 more applications across those 6 days, and received 2 responses that led nowhere, and 4 silences that led the same place by a different route. He ironed a shirt on Tuesday night, then ironed a different one, then went back to the first. Wednesday morning he drove to Vosgrand. He had passed it before, multiple times in the weeks since meeting Loretta and Simone. Not stopping, just noting it the way you note something that might matter: the deep brown stone, the wide front steps, the brass fittings that caught morning light in a way that made the building look like it had been built with intention rather than budget, which it had. That was the difference you could see from the street if you knew how to look. He arrived 30 minutes early and sat in his car and did not run lines. He had never prepared by running lines. He prepared by getting clear on what he actually knew and trusting that what he actually knew would be enough. If it was not enough, then the job was not the right fit. And if the job was not the right fit, he would find the right fit somewhere else. He believed that. He had to believe that. It was the belief that had kept him functional across 12 years of being the only person responsible for another human life. At 9:52, he got out of the car, walked up the front steps, through the lobby. The lobby told him things. High ceilings, dark wood that had been chosen, not defaulted to. Lighting warm in a way that required thought, the kind of thought that happened before the building opened, not after. A sitting area with chairs that looked used rather than decorative. Fresh flowers in a simple vase on a low table, positioned not for display but for the person sitting closest to them. He filed all of it, because this was information. Because understanding what the hotel thought of itself was part of being ready to work inside it. The panel was on the second floor. 3 people. Ms. Adeyeze Obi, Director of Guest Experience, who had the focused economy of someone who had sat across from many candidates and had stopped being interested in performance sometime around the 4th year of doing it. Mr. Curtis Beaumont, General Manager. Older, the kind of professional stillness that accumulates over decades of knowing exactly how much reaction any situation requires. And a woman named Tanya from HR, whose last name was not offered, and who took notes with the focused speed of someone who had developed her own shorthand and trusted it completely. He sat across from them with the city behind them through the window, gray morning sky, traffic moving below. Ms. Obi started. "Tell us about your most recent position," he told them. Directly and without apology. Ember Grill. 4 years. His responsibilities, the scope of service he had managed, the ways the role had developed over time. He told them it had ended recently, and that he was looking for something with more scope. He did not mention Roland. He did not describe the circumstances of his departure. If they had researched him and a hotel TEFL operating at this level, certainly had, they would know what they needed to know. If they asked directly, he would answer directly. Mr. Beaumont asked about supervisory experience. He described what he had actually done training incoming servers, covering shift lead responsibilities when the scheduled supervisor was out, managing escalating guest situations when the manager was not available. None of it came with a formal title, but it was real work, documented in the results of those shifts and in the people who had worked beside him. Tanya offered a scenario, a VEP guest with a complaint that did not have a clean resolution. He gave her his actual approach rather than the hospitality industry script. Acknowledge what went wrong. Take personal ownership of the fix regardless of where the error originated. Make the guest's immediate experience your priority and sort out the internal accounting afterward. Ms. Obi wrote something down without looking up. The interview ran 55 minutes. When it ended, Mr. Beaumont said they would be in touch within the week. He thanked all 3, shook hands, walked back through the lobby and down the front steps and onto the sidewalk and stood there for a moment in the cold air. He had no way of knowing how it had gone. That was always the honest answer. He knew what he had said, and whether it was true, and it was, and passed that the outcome was not in his hands. He walked to his car, drove home, made coffee, called Renata, who told him to stop overthinking, which was not useful advice but was delivered with enough warmth to be worth receiving. 3 days later, Thursday afternoon, Delphine called. They wanted him to start Monday. He sat down on the edge of his bed and looked at the floor for a moment, not from shock exactly, from the specific weight of something you have been working toward finally becoming real, which has its own gravity. "Mr. Reese?" Delphine's voice, patient. "Monday is fine," he said. "Thank you." He called Renata. "She said I told you." He said you did. That evening he told Aldric. Not everything, not Loretta. Not the full shape of how it had come together. Just the essential facts. He had lost the job at Ember Grill. He had been looking. He had found something better. They were okay. Aldric was quiet for a moment. "How long have you been not telling me?" "A few weeks." "Dad, I didn't want you worrying about something I could handle." Aldric looked at him with an expression that was familiar in the way that mirrors are familiar. "You can tell me things," he said. "I'm not 12, I know that. Is it a good job?" Devonte thought about the lobby, the flowers in the vase, the lighting someone had thought about before anyone arrived. Yeah, he said, it's a good job. Aldric nodded, stood up, went to the kitchen, started making something that smelled, within minutes, aggressively of cumin, which meant things were fine. Aldric cooked when things were fine. It was a reliable indicator. He started on a Monday. Vos Grand operated on a scale that Ember Grill had not prepared him for, not because he was not ready, but because the difference was structural. More moving parts, more layers of coordination, more ways for excellence and failure to compound across a single shift. He spent his first day with the outgoing coordinator, a woman named Priya, who was brisk and thorough and delivered the hotel's operational complexity like a graduate course compressed into 8 hours. Systems, client database, VIP preference files, vendor contacts, the specific communication rhythms expected between departments, staff rotation logic. He absorbed it the way he had always absorbed new environments, not passively, with the focused attention of someone who understood that the details other people skipped were exactly the ones that mattered later. The team was 12 people across 3 rotations. He met all of them in the first week, arranged some eager, some experienced, a few waiting to see what kind of supervisor he was before deciding how much to give him. He recognized that last group immediately. He had been that person. He gave them time and gave them nothing to object to, and let the work speak at whatever pace it needed. His desk was in a small office off the main guest services corridor, shared with 2 other coordinators who worked different shifts. The space was functional, a window that faced the interior courtyard rather than the street. A shelf with binders he reorganized on his second day because the previous system was alphabetical by vendor name rather than by function, which meant finding anything required knowing what you were looking for before you looked. He reorganized it by function. Nobody mentioned it, but within a week, 2 other people were using the system. Prescott Noel he encountered on his 3rd day. He would have read the situation even without prior knowledge. Guest relations manager, 1 level above Devonte's team but operating in overlapping territory. Mid-30s. The kind of professional efficiency that presented well in meetings and required closer inspection to evaluate. He introduced himself with a firm handshake and a comment about the hotel being glad to have someone with Devonte's background joining the team. The sentence sounded like a welcome and functioned as something else, an inventory. Where did you come from? What are you here for? Are you a problem or not? Devonte smiled, said he was glad to be there, kept the rest to himself. He watched Prescott the way he watched all new environments, not with hostility, with attention. He noted who Prescott spoke to and how. The way he positioned himself in conversations not at the center but just adjacent to it, slightly between other people and the people above them. The particular skill of a man who had learned to make himself the necessary conduit for things that should flow freely. He also noted the gaps. Prescott performed management beautifully. He was less consistent at the parts that required sustained follow-through when the result was invisible. The details that only mattered to the person on the receiving end. The guest who never knew their preference had been logged. The staff member who never knew their question had been passed along. Devonte kept these observations to himself. They were data, not ammunition. Within 2 weeks his team had shifted, not dramatically, in the way that rooms shift temperature gradually, until the change is simply the new condition. He was not easy on them. He had standards and he communicated them without ambiguity, but he did not treat mistakes as evidence of character flaws. When someone on his team got something wrong, he spoke to them privately, specifically, and then moved on. He did not return to it. He did not build a file. A woman named Waverly on the morning rotation had been making consistent errors in the VIP preference system for 4 months. Wrong fields. The downstream effect rippled into housekeeping and room service in ways that were visible to guests without anyone knowing the source. 2 supervisors before Devonte had documented the errors. Neither had investigated the origin. He sat with her on a Tuesday afternoon in one of the back offices. Coffee. System open in front of both of them. Turned out she had been trained on the wrong screen. The database had 2 nearly identical interfaces, and her initial training had never clearly differentiated between them. 4 months of errors because the foundation was wrong, not the person. He corrected the foundation. The errors stopped within a week. Waverley's manner around him changed, a slight easing, a new willingness to ask questions before situations became problems. He noticed, did not comment on it, just created enough consistency that she could trust the change was real. That was the work. That was what it actually looked like when nobody was watching. The first significant test came at the end of his third week, a corporate event. 2 days, 42 attendees, specific dietary requirements distributed across the group. The booking had been in the system for 6 weeks, managed initially under Prescott's team before handoff. Devonte received the file 3 days before the event start. The dietary requirement list was incomplete. Not every field missing, fields missing to matter. 11 of the 42 attendees had been summarized rather than fully documented. The kitchen had received the summarized version. If the event ran on that brief, 11 people across 2 days would receive meals ranging from inconvenient to genuinely problematic. He found this at 8:30 in the morning, 72 hours before the event. He did not send an escalation email. He did not call a meeting. He pulled the original booking correspondence from the archive, went through every document in the chain, identified the 11 incomplete entries, cross-referenced the original inquiry forms that were still attached to the initial booking file, and rebuilt the complete requirement list by noon. Then he called the catering supervisor directly. They rebuilt the brief together on the phone, confirmed every entry, and he stayed until 6 that evening to verify the corrected brief had been received and reviewed by the kitchen team. He sent a single summary email to his direct supervisor. 31 words. There was a gap in the dietary documentation for the Hargrove event. The gap has been corrected and confirmed with catering. The event is fully covered. No blame assigned, no drama, no request for acknowledgement. The event ran without incident. The corporate client sent a follow-up praising the service coordination. The email moved up the chain. Devonte did not know about it until Waverley mentioned it a week later, having seen it posted to the internal commendation board. He thanked her and went back to his work. What he did not know was that Prescott had seen it too, and had understood, without being told, that the gap in the original file had originated in his team's preparation of the handoff, and had begun quietly to calculate. The rumor reached Devonte in the second week of November. Not directly. Rumors of this type never arrived directly. They arrived in the pause that entered a room when he walked into it, in the slightly different quality of certain conversations, in the way 2 people in the break room found reasons to be somewhere else when he came in for coffee. By Friday, he had assembled a clear enough picture. The rumor was that his position had been arranged, that the interview panel had been instructed, that someone above the standard process had placed him in the role through a personal connection to the ownership of the hotel. He sat with this information for 2 days. He identified Prescott as the origin the same way you identify where a draft is coming from by tracing the cold back to its source. The people repeating the rumor moved in Prescott's orbit. The timing matched his incident report. The specific claim not just that he had a connection, but that the panel had been instructed required someone with proximity to the hiring conversation to invent it convincingly. What he did with this information was nothing visible. He did not confront Prescott. Confrontation would make him the story, and he had no interest in being the story. He went deeper into the work instead. He kept his team running cleanly. He handled every guest interaction with his full attention, and every internal process with the precision that left no legitimate surface for criticism. He had one rule about integrity, formed somewhere in his late 20s and never revised. You do not defend it with words. You make it evident through what you repeatedly do. Words can be argued with. A consistent record cannot. So he built the record. The second test arrived on a Tuesday night, 3.5 weeks in. He was covering a late shift, his own choice, traded with a team member whose personal situation required it when the call came in. VIP guest, premier suite, specific dietary protocol documented in the preference file. Room service had delivered the wrong meal. Not slightly wrong. Categorically wrong. An error that should not have been possible given the documentation, which meant something had broken down in the chain between the file and the kitchen. He took the call personally. He went upstairs, knocked, introduced himself by name and role. The guest was a man in his 50s, clearly at the end of a long travel day, managing more frustration than he was expressing, which Devonte respected. He listened without interrupting, did not explain or apologize his way through the explanation. Did not explain at all, actually. Just listened until the man was finished. Then I'm going to fix this personally. 30 minutes. If it's not right when I come back, we'll figure out what else I can do. 37 minutes later, he was back at the door. Meal correct in every detail, plated with care. And a note, not a hotel card, not a form, a handwritten note on plain paper. 3 sentences in his own handwriting acknowledging the error, taking responsibility for the inconvenience and stating directly that it should not have happened. The guest looked at the tray, at the note. You wrote this yourself? Yes, sir. The man was quiet for a moment. Something shifted in his face. Not softened exactly, just recalibrated. All right, he said. Thank you. Devonte went back downstairs. He wrote the incident report at his desk. Traced the error through the chain, found the disconnect in the handoff between afternoon and evening shifts, a communication gap rather than negligence. Wrote up the specific protocol adjustment that would close it. Specific, implementable. 1 paragraph. He was finishing the report at 12:43 in the morning when he became aware of someone else in the lobby. Not a guest. The lobby had a particular quality at that hour, the overnight staff moving quietly, everything dialed down to its maintenance rhythm. This was a different presence. Someone standing near the corridor that led to the administrative wing, still in a coat, looking at her phone. He looked up. Simone Voss was standing in the lobby of her own hotel. She was wearing a long coat over what was clearly the end of an evening, the hem of something dark and structured visible below the coat, heels on the marble. She had come from somewhere else and stopped here, either because it was on the way or because she had a reason. She looked up, saw him. Neither of them moved for a moment. He stood. Because he had manners, and also because something about being caught at his desk by the woman who owned the building made standing feel like the correct response. She crossed the lobby, stopped at a professional distance, looked at the papers on his desk, then at him. You're here late, she said, covering a shift and finishing an incident report. He looked at her steadily. You're here late too. I had a dinner. She glanced at the desk. The VIP situation on 14. You already know about it. I know about most things that happen in this building. She said it without apology. I got an alert on the original complaint. I came to check the status. He turned the report so she could read the summary. She leaned forward and read it. Actually read it, not a skim, not a quick pass for reassurance. Her eyes moved through the text with the same quality of attention she brought to everything which he had begun to understand was not performance. It was just how she operated. When she straightened, something in her bearing had shifted slightly, a recalibration. You wrote a protocol change, she said. The gap exists. Someone was going to have to close it. Most people would have filed the incident and waited to be asked. He looked at her. Would that have closed the gap? She held his gaze. No. Then it wasn't enough. A pause, the lobby quiet around them. The overnight staff moving in the distance, unhurried. The marble floor and the low lights and the flowers in the vase, different flowers now than the ones from his first day, changed daily, which he had noticed in his first week and understood as an indicator of something. I need to say something to you, he said. She waited. Which he was learning was what she did. She created space for the thing to be said rather than filling the space herself. The rumors about my hire, he said. I know where they're coming from. And I know you probably know too. I have a strong impression, she said. I'm not asking you to do anything about it. He looked at her directly. I want you to know that I went through the process the way I asked you to let me go through it. The panel was real. The evaluation was real. I didn't come in here on a favor. And I'm not running on one now. She was quiet for a moment. I know that. I need you to know that I know it, he said. Because there's a difference between you knowing it and me needing your reassurance about it. I'm not asking for reassurance. I'm telling you that whatever happens with the rumor, it doesn't change how I'm doing this job. I'm going to keep doing it the same way whether the rumor fades tomorrow or runs for 6 more months. Something changed in her face. Not dramatically. The way a very still surface changes when something moves beneath it, barely visible. But there, why are you telling me this? She said. Not a challenge. A real question. Because you came here at 12:40 in the morning to check on a guest complaint, he said. Which means you care about this hotel, the way people care about things they built, rather than things they inherited. And people who care about things they built deserve to know exactly what kind of person is working inside them. The lobby held them both in its quiet for a long moment. Simone looked at him, and for the first time since the conference room meeting, since the handshake that had felt direct and genuine, she looked at him without the particular professional distance that she wore the way other people wore formal clothing. Not unprofessionally, just without the buffer. The full account of her attention, aimed at him, nothing mediating it. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" She considered that for a moment. "Someone grateful," she said. "Someone who understood the situation and adjusted his posture accordingly." "I am grateful," he said. "That doesn't change my posture." She looked at him for another moment. Then she picked up her bag from where she had set it, on the edge of his desk, a motion so small it barely registered, and yet it was the motion of someone who had been standing in one place longer than they intended, and was now deciding to move. "The incident report is good," she said. "The protocol change is better." She paused. "Good night, Mr. Reese. Good night, Ms. Voss." She walked toward the elevator. Heels on marble, the sound of it precise and unhurried. The elevator opened. She stepped in. The doors closed. He stood there for a moment after she was gone. Then he sat back down, capped his pen, straightened the report, and began shutting down his desk for the night. He had said what he needed to say, not to impress her, not to defend himself, because clarity mattered more to him than comfort, and because he had spent too many years in environments where the things that needed saying were the things nobody said, and he had learned the cost of that. He turned off the desk lamp, stood, put on his jacket. He was almost at the lobby exit when he stopped, turned around, looked at the lobby, the marble, the low lights, the flowers, the front desk, where the overnight staff moved with the quiet efficiency of people who took pride in work that most guests would never notice. He thought about Ember Grill, about the corner table, about a woman in a green coat sitting alone with a cup of tea that had gone cold and hands that were shaking, and a dignity so intact it had not required a single word of explanation. He thought about the apron folded on the service station counter, and he thought, "I am standing in a lobby that I am responsible for. A lobby in a hotel where 12 people on my team showed up today and did their jobs and improved, in small ways, because of what I built around them this week. A lobby where tonight a guest ate a correct meal and read 3 sentences in my handwriting and said all right, not a triumph, not a movie ending, just the accumulation of what you do when you keep showing up and doing it right." He walked out into the November night. The cold hit him cleanly. He stood on the front steps for a moment and looked at the street, the city doing its late-night version of itself, quieter, more honest, the daytime performance set aside. He drove home. The apartment was dark except for the thin line of light under Aldric's door. On the kitchen counter, a covered plate. Aldric's handwriting on a sticky note, "Don't skip it. Also, I figured out the rice situation for real this time." He stood in the kitchen and read the note twice. Then he set it on the counter where he would see it in the morning and poured himself a glass of water and stood by the window for a moment, looking out at the street below. He was not at peace, exactly. Peace suggested an arrival, a completed destination, and he understood his life well enough to know it did not work that way. What he felt was something more functional than peace, a kind of steady operational clarity, the sense of a man who knows what he is doing and why, and has enough evidence now to believe it is working. He thought about Simone's face in the lobby, the moment when the professional distance had dropped, not because he had charmed it away or performed his way through it, because he had said the true thing and she had recognized it as true, and people who have been lied to many times develop a very precise radar for the difference. He did not know what that moment meant. He was not going to decide what it meant tonight at 1 in the morning in his kitchen. What he knew was simpler. He had shown up. He had done the work. He had told the truth when it mattered and kept his mouth shut when it didn't, and built something real in 3.5 weeks out of nothing but attention and consistency. That was enough to build on. That was, in fact, a great deal. He put the glass in the sink, turned off the kitchen light, walked to his room. On the small desk beside his bed, the desk where he had once sat running numbers through a calculator that never came out, even there was a notebook. He had started writing in it 2 weeks ago. Not personal writing, professional. Ideas for the training program he wanted to build eventually, if the opportunity came. Notes on what he had observed about guest behavior, about staff communication patterns, about the specific moments where service either became memorable or became invisible. He picked up the notebook, sat on the edge of the bed, read through the last 3 pages of notes. Then he wrote one more line. The parts nobody sees are the ones that hold it together. He closed the notebook, set it down, lay back. Outside, the city went on being the city. Inside, a man who had been doing hard things alone, for a long time, let himself rest without apology, without the calculator running, without the low hum of financial terror that had been the background music of his life for months. He had done the work today. He would do it again tomorrow. And somewhere in that repetition, in the daily commitment to showing up and doing it right and not cutting corners on the invisible parts, something was being built that had not existed before. He did not need to name it yet. It was enough to know it was there. The internal investigation did not begin because of Devonte. That was the part he needed to understand later, when he finally understood all of it. It did not begin because he had said anything. It did not begin because Simone had taken his words in the lobby and acted on them directly. It began because of a pattern. Because patterns, when they go on long enough, leave marks. And marks, when enough of them accumulate in the same place, eventually become visible to people whose job it is to look. Miss Ada's Obi had been looking for 6 weeks before Devonte ever walked through the front doors of Vos Grand. She did not advertise this. She was not the kind of woman who advertised her process. She simply moved through the hotel each day with her clipboard and her quiet attention and her institutional memory that stretched back 11 years, and she noticed things, small things, the kind of things that individually looked like coincidence and collectively looked like something else. 4 new hires in the past 14 months. All 4 had left within their first 90 days. 3 of them had cited vague reasons in their exit interviews: cultural fit, personal circumstances, opportunities elsewhere. 1 had been more specific. She had said she felt consistently set up to fail, that she received incomplete information before critical moments, that she had been repeatedly passed over for commendations that went instead to a colleague who had not done the work. She had named the colleague. Miss Obi had filed that interview, had watched, had waited for corroborating data, because 1 voice was not enough, and 1 exit interview was not a pattern. It was a grievance, and grievances required verification. Devonte's incident report gave her the corroboration she needed, not because it accused anyone. It did not. It was 3 pages of clear, precise documentation about a catering gap, a guest impact, a resolution, and a protocol change. Nothing inflammatory. Nothing that pointed a finger. But it was specific enough about the timeline of the information failure that Miss Obi could trace the gap back through the handoff chain and identify exactly where it had originated. Prescott Noel's team had received the complete dietary requirement list. They had summarized it, and the summarization had omitted 11 entries. Whether that was negligence or intention was a question Miss Obi spent 10 days answering. She pulled files. She cross-referenced. She had quiet conversations with 3 members of Prescott's team, individually, framed not as investigation but as process review. She was very good at this, at the particular skill of creating a space where people told the truth without realizing they had decided to. What she found was not a villain making dramatic choices. It was something more ordinary and in some ways more corrosive. A man who had learned to manage upward beautifully and sideways minimally and downward not at all. Who treated information as currency and distributed it accordingly. Who had, over 2 years, built a small empire of indispensability by making himself the necessary conduit for things that should have flowed freely. She brought her findings to Mr. Beaumont on a Thursday morning. Mr. Beaumont read them. Set the report down, picked it up again. Set it down. How confident are you? He said. Very, she said. He looked at the window for a moment. Then he picked up his phone. Devonte did not know any of this was happening. He was, on that same Thursday morning, running a team meeting about the holiday booking season, which was 8 weeks away. and required specific preparation, staffing adjustments, vendor coordination, the particular logistical complexity of managing a hotel at 110% capacity during a period when guests had elevated expectations and reduced patience. His team was getting better. He could feel it the way you feel the temperature of a room change, not in one moment but gradually, cumulatively, until one day you realize it is simply warmer in here than it used to be. Waverley had not made a system error in 3 weeks and had started asking questions proactively, which was a different thing entirely from waiting to be told. A young man named Obinna, who had been quiet and watchful in the first weeks, had started offering suggestions in meetings, small ones, practical ones, the kind that came from someone who had been thinking carefully about the work and had decided it was safe to say the thoughts out loud. Safe. That was the word. He had been trying to build that. Not softness, not the absence of standards, just the specific kind of safety that allowed people to do their best work without spending half their energy managing their own fear. He knew what the other kind felt like. He had worked in it for 4 years. After the meeting, he went to his desk and found an email from Mr. Beaumont. Brief, professional, asking if he had time for a conversation at 2 o'clock. He wrote back, yes. He spent the intervening hours not thinking about the email, which was its own kind of thinking about it. He did his work. He handled 2 guest calls, one requiring a room adjustment and one requiring a vendor coordination for a small private event. He ate lunch at his desk because he had not brought anything, and the break room had a vending machine, and he had opinions about vending machine food, but not enough opinions to go get something better. At 2 o'clock he went to Mr. Beaumont's office. Ms. Obi was already there, sitting in one of the chairs across from the desk. She did not look up when he came in, which told him nothing, because Ms. Obi had a face that she operated independently of whatever she was thinking, which was a professional skill he deeply respected. He sat. Mr. Beaumont told him about the investigation. Not the full detail, the relevant summary. What had been found. What had been decided. He told Devonte that Prescott Noel had been placed on administrative leave, pending a formal review process. He told him that the review was expected to result in a separation from the hotel. He told him that several of Prescott's responsibilities would be redistributed. He did not tell Devonte that he had been the indirect origin of the investigation. Miss Obi had decided that Devonte did not need to know that part. People who had done nothing wrong did not need the weight of knowing their work had triggered consequences for someone else, even someone who had warranted them. Mr. Beaumont said, I want you to know this has no bearing on your position, which is secure. But I also want you to know because you deserve to understand the environment you're working in. Devonte looked at him, then at Ms. Obi. Is there anything you want me to do differently? He said. Mr. Beaumont almost smiled. No, he said. Keep doing what you're doing. He walked back to his desk, sat down. So Prescott was gone, or going. The rumors about his own hiring would likely fade now, without Prescott's quiet maintenance of them. The structural gap in the handoff process had been closed by his protocol change. The team was improving. He had not done any of this by fighting. He had not made demands or issued accusations or gone above anyone's head. He had just done the work, completely, honestly, with the same attention to every part of it, visible and invisible. His father had told him something once, when he was maybe 14 years old, standing in his father's garage, helping with a repair that was taking longer than expected. He had complained about a step that seemed unnecessary. His father had not looked up from what he was doing. He had just said, the parts nobody sees are the ones that hold it together. He had not thought about that. In years, he thought about it now. The call from Aldric came on a Friday evening in early December. Not a call about school, not a call about dinner or logistics or one of the ordinary human things that filled the space between them. This was a different kind of call. He could hear it in the first word, the specific quality of his son's voice when something had happened that Aldric did not quite know how to say. Dad, Aldric said, I need to tell you something. He pulled over. He was driving. He pulled over because this was the kind of sentence that required him to be still. I'm listening, he said. And Aldric told him. It came out in pieces, the way difficult things do, when someone has been holding them for a long time and has finally decided the holding is worse than the telling. Over the past 2 months, Aldric had been managing a debt. Not a large debt in absolute terms, but large in proportion to everything he had. He had borrowed money from 2 friends to cover expenses. He had not wanted to ask his father about a textbook, a course fee, a situation with his housing deposit that had gotten complicated. He had intended to pay it back. He had a plan. And then the plan had failed because the part-time position he had lined up fell through and the timeline had collapsed. And now he owed money to people who were starting to be impatient about it. How much? Devonte said. Aldric told him. Devonte closed his eyes for one moment. Just one. Then he opened them. How long have you been carrying this? About 8 weeks. Aldric, I know. Why didn't you? Because you were already dealing with the job thing, the Ember Grill thing. I could see you managing it, and I didn't want to add. His voice was quiet, not angry. Quiet in the way that was actually the opposite of quiet, the way silence can be loud when it has weight in it. Don't do that. Don't decide what I can handle. A pause, that's what you do, Aldric said. The words landed, and they were true. He knew they were true the moment he heard them. He had spent 12 years deciding what Aldric could handle. He had done it from love. He had done it from the particular terror of a parent who has already lost one person and knows in his body what loss feels like and will do nearly anything to protect the people who remain from any version of it, even the small versions, even the ordinary ones. But Aldric was 20 years old, and Aldric was sitting somewhere right now having held 8 weeks of a problem alone, because he had learned, from watching his father, that was what you did. You managed it yourself. You did not add to the other person's load. He had taught his son to do the thing that was currently breaking his own heart. I'm coming over, he said. You don't have to, I'm coming over. He drove across the city to the apartment near Aldric's campus, parked, went upstairs, knocked. Aldric opened the door and stood there looking like 20 years old looks when it is tired and ashamed and relieved, all at the same time. Devonte looked at him for a moment. Then he walked in and sat down on the couch and said, Sit down. Aldric sat, and Devonte told him things. Things he had not told him before. Not because he had been hiding them, but because he had never found the moment, had never thought the moment was necessary, had assumed the present was enough, and the past did not need to be excavated. He told him about the year after his mother died. Not the practical year, the logistics, the childcare arrangements, the sudden education in how to do everything that had previously been divided between 2 people. Not that year. The interior one. The year when he had gone to bed each night not knowing if he was doing any of it right. When he had stood in grocery stores making the same calculations Devonte still made and had felt, for the first time in his adult life, genuinely afraid. Not of poverty exactly. Of failing. Of being the thing standing between his child and a life worth living and not being enough of a thing. He told him about the guitar. He had not planned to tell him about the guitar. It came out anyway. Aldric was quiet for a long time after that, looking at the floor. Somewhere in his face, something that had been held very straight and careful for a long time was letting go. I didn't know about the guitar, he said. I know, Dad. I would never have. I know, Devonte said. That's why I didn't tell you. He paused. But I should have. Not then, you were 8. But later I should have talked to you more. Let you in more. He looked at his son. I thought I was protecting you. I was just teaching you to be as stubborn and closed off as me. Aldric made a sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. You're not that bad, he said. I'm a little bad, yeah. A pause, a little. They sat for a moment in the quiet of the apartment. Outside, the December city was doing its December things, the cold, the lights, the particular energy of a place gearing up for a season that demanded feeling. Inside, just a father and his son on a couch, figuring out something that should have been figured out years earlier and was being figured out now, which was not too late. The debt, Devonte said finally. We'll handle it. I can. Together, he said. We handle it together. That's the deal. Aldric looked at him. Okay, he said. And going forward. Devonte looked at him steadily. You tell me. Before it gets to 8 weeks. Before it gets to 2 weeks. You just tell me. You do the same, Aldric said. A pause. Fair, Devonte said. They ordered food. Sat at the small kitchen table in Aldric's apartment, and ate and talked about other things Professor Aldric found both infuriating and compelling. A project that was due before the break, the guitar that Devonte had sold when Aldric was 8, and which Aldric, it turned out, had been aware of in the vague unexamined way. Children are aware of things they do not have the words for yet. I always wondered why we didn't have it anymore, Aldric said. I thought you forgot about it. I remembered the sound. He looked at Devonte. You used to play on Sunday mornings, when you thought I was still asleep. Devonte looked at his son. I was never asleep, Aldric said. He drove home that night through the December city with the heater running and the radio off, and a feeling in his chest that he did not immediately have a name for. Not happiness exactly, not the resolved, clean happiness of a story that had finished. Something rawer than that, something that had been opened up and was now exposed to air for the first time in a long time, which felt uncomfortable in the way that healing sometimes does when you have been closed for too long. He thought about Aldric, about the guitar, about Sunday mornings when his son had been lying in bed listening to him play and he had not known, had thought he was alone in it, had thought the music was just for him. He had not been as alone as he thought. That was the thing. That was the understanding that arrived slowly, over the next days, settling into him the way winter settles into a building, gradual, pervasive, changing the temperature of everything. He had been so focused on the weight he was carrying that he had not noticed how many hands were reaching for it. The news about Ember Grill reached him in the second week of December. Not from Simone, from Renata, who had seen something on a business news feed and sent him a link with a text that said only, "Is this connected to you somehow?" He clicked the link. Voss Hospitality Group had acquired a regional restaurant chain, 11 locations. The acquisition had been finalized 4 days ago. The chain included, among its 11 locations, Ember Grill on Carver Street. He read the article twice. Then he put his phone down and looked at the wall of his apartment for a moment. He thought about the corner table, the green coat, the canvas shoes, the tea that had gone cold while a woman sat alone and waited to see who would stop. He thought about Roland. He did not feel what he might have expected to feel. Not satisfaction. Not the clean cinematic rush of watching the wheel turn. He felt something more complicated and more quiet. He felt mostly tired. And then, beneath the tired, something that was not quite relief but was adjacent to it. The sense of a thing finally being over. He called Simone. 3 rings. "I saw the news," he said when she picked up. A brief pause. "I should have told you directly. I'm sorry. What happens to the restaurant? We're restructuring the management across all 11 locations, bringing in new leadership, rewriting the staff policies." She paused again. "There's a specific policy change that will be implemented chain-wide. Employees will never be subject to disciplinary action for stopping to assist a guest who requires help." He was quiet for a moment. "That's not going to come from you," he said. "No." Another pause. "It's already written." "What about Roland?" Roland Mack was removed from his position as part of the acquisition review. There was a pattern in his management record that didn't survive scrutiny. Simple. Final. He won't be placed in a management position within any Voss property. He breathed once, slow. "I need you to know something," he said. "All right. I don't want this to be about him. I don't need it to be about him." He looked at the window, the December light. What happened was wrong. But the best thing that comes out of it isn't his consequences. It's the policy change. It's the people who keep their jobs next year, because somebody finally wrote it down that helping a person in need is not a fireable offense. A silence. "My mother said something like that," Simone said. Almost word for word. "Your mother is a wise woman." "She is." And then, after a pause that had a different quality to it, something less professional and more personal, "So are you." He did not know what to do with that. So he let it sit for a moment, let it be what it was. "Thank you," he said, "for all of it." "You did the work," she said. "You opened the door." "Don't make it poetic, Mr. Reese. It doesn't suit either of us." He laughed. An actual laugh. The kind that came from somewhere unguarded. Her voice, when she spoke again, was slightly different. The professional edge still there, but something under it. Something that had been there, he thought, since a lobby at 12:40 in the morning, and a handwritten note, and a man who stayed to fix something that was not technically his fault. "Devonte," she said, and it was the first time she had used his name directly. Not Mr. Reese. not a formality. Just his name. Yeah, he said. Would you pause? The kind that was not uncertainty exactly, but was the space before saying something that mattered. My mother wants to have dinner. She's been asking for weeks. She wants to cook, which means it will be excellent, and also very involved and probably loud. Another pause. I'll be there. He looked at the window for a moment. Sunday, he said. Sunday, she said. He called Aldric when he hung up, told him about the acquisition, told him about the policy change, told him for the first time about Loretta, about the green coat and the canvas shoes and the cup of tea that had gone cold, about the corner table and the choice that had not felt like a choice at all, just the obvious next thing, just what you did. Aldric listened to all of it without interrupting. When Devonte finished, Aldric was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "So she owns the hotel you work at." "Her daughter does. And her daughter offered you the job. After a real interview, which I did not know was connected until after." "Dad." A pause. "That's a lot." "It is." Another pause. "Is the daughter, I mean. Is she?" Aldric stopped. Tried again. "You said she was at the lobby at midnight. She was checking on a guest complaint." "Uh-huh. It was professional." "Uh-huh." "Aldric, I'm just asking questions. You're not asking anything. You're making sounds. Very informed sounds." A pause. "She sounds interesting." He did not respond to that, which was, he understood, its own kind of response. The promotion came on the Thursday before Christmas. He had not expected it. He had been at the hotel for 8 weeks, which was not enough time by any conventional measure for a role change, and he was not someone who expected to move faster than the timeline merited. He had been focused on the current job, on doing it well, on building the team into something that functioned better with him in it than without. Mr. Beaumont called him into the office. Ms. Obi was there again. They offered him the Regional Guest Experience Director position, overseeing guest services operations across 3 Voss properties, a real leadership role, staff across multiple locations, budget authority, a seat at the table for seasonal planning at the executive level. He sat with it for a moment. "This is a large step," he said. "Yes," Mr. Beaumont said. "Based on 8 weeks. Based on 6 weeks that told us more than some people's 8 years." "Ms. Obi said. Without embellishment, just fact. He looked at her, at Mr. Beaumont. "I have one request," he said. They waited. "I want to develop a training program for guest services staff across all 3 properties. Something that specifically addresses how we handle guests who need additional assistance, elderly guests, guests with mobility issues, guests who are overwhelmed or confused or in distress." He paused. "Not a checklist, a real program. Something with weight to it." Mr. Beaumont looked at Miss Obi. Miss Obi looked at Devonte. "That would be entirely within the scope of the role," she said. He nodded. "Then yes." He called Renata that night, told her everything. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "I need you to understand that Mama would be so proud of you right now." And he had to set the phone down for a second, because she was right, and it hit him in a place that had not been hit in a long time. He picked the phone back up. "I know," he said. "Are you good?" "I'm good." For real, Renata. Okay?" He could hear her smiling. "Okay then." Sunday came. Loretta's home was not the penthouse. It was a house. An actual house, 3 bedrooms, a neighborhood on the east side that had been many things over the decades, and was currently something warm and rooted and alive. A porch with chairs, a door with a wreath on it. The smell of something cooking that reached him before he had fully gotten out of the car. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Aldric was beside him. He had asked Aldric to come, and Aldric had said obviously, which was the right answer, and had spent 20 minutes deciding what to wear, which was also the right answer, because it meant he was taking it seriously. "You nervous?" Aldric said. "No. You've been standing on the sidewalk for 45 seconds. I'm appreciating the moment." "Dad, I'm a little nervous." Aldric smiled. The smile that was his mother's and also entirely his own. "It's going to be fine." The door opened before they reached it. Loretta stood in the doorway in a proper dress, navy blue, the kind of dress that had nothing to do with canvas shoes or old coats. She was wearing reading glasses pushed up on her head, and she had a dish towel over one shoulder, and she looked like someone who had been cooking since morning and was delighted about it. "You brought your son," she said. "Not a question." Just pleasure, he insisted, Devonte said. Aldric extended his hand. Loretta looked at it, then looked at him, then pulled him into a hug that clearly surprised him based on his expression. Come in, she said. Both of you. It's cold, and the food is hot, and that's the only math that matters. They went in. The house was warm. The kind of warm that was not just temperature but presence: bookshelves, photographs, a throw blanket on the couch that had clearly been used many times, a kitchen that smelled of generations of good decisions. It was the home of a woman who had lived fully in it. Every corner said so. Simone was in the kitchen. She was wearing a deep burgundy dress, fitted silk at the hem, her hair straight and smooth. She was standing at the counter, apparently engaged in a very focused disagreement with a jar that would not open, which she resolved by wrapping it in a dish towel and applying force that suggested she was not someone who asked for help with jars. She looked up when they came in, looked at Devonte, then at Aldric. You must be Aldric, she said. Yes, ma'am. And then Aldric, who had his father's manners and his mother's instinct for reading a room, added, I've heard a lot about you. Simone's eyes moved to Devonte. Devonte said nothing, which he was increasingly good at in a useful way. I hope it was accurate, she said. He said you shake hands like you mean it, Aldric said. A pause. She looked at Devonte again, something in her face that he was beginning to learn the language of the slight shift around the eyes, the fractional change in the set of her mouth that in another person might have been a wide smile and in her was this, restrained, but real. That's accurate, she said. Dinner was long and loud in the way that Loretta had promised, which meant it was loud with conversation and warmth rather than noise for its own sake. Loretta had made things that required actual cooking, the kind of food that accumulated in layers over hours and tasted like someone had been thinking about the people who would eat it the whole time. They sat at a table that fit 4 people, if you did not mind being close, and they did not mind. Aldric talked to Loretta about school, and she asked real questions, not the polite questions adults ask young people when they are not actually interested, but questions that required him to think about his answers. What do you want to build? Not what do you want to be? What do you want to build? Devonte watched his son sit up slightly straighter in response to that. Watched him take the question seriously. Watched him figure out in real time that the answer he had given to the easy version of that question was not the answer to this one. Good, he thought. That's good. Simone was across the table from him. They did not talk to each other much during the meal, which was not because there was nothing to say. It was because the table was full of other conversations, and both of them were people who did not need to fill space, who could be in the same room and not require the room to be organized around them. After dinner, Aldric helped Loretta with the dishes, which Devonte suspected was a combination of genuine helpfulness and strategic positioning, leaving the kitchen to allow something to happen that might need a little room. His son was perceptive. Another inherited quality. He and Simone ended up on the porch. December cold. The neighborhood quiet at this hour, the particular stillness of a Sunday evening in a residential street where the lights were on in all the windows and everyone was inside. She had a glass of wine. He had coffee. They stood at the porch railing and looked at the street. My mother is going to ask Aldric to come for Christmas, she said. He'll say yes, I know. A pause. She already loves him, he's easy to love. He looked at the street, she's also not subtle. No, she never has been. Another pause. She knew, you know. From the beginning. The restaurant. The coat. She told me it wasn't a test that night, that she genuinely had an episode. But she was watching. She always watches, I know. She watched me for years, Simone said, after the divorce. After certain decisions I made about how to build the business. She watched and she waited and she said very little. And then one day she just said, You've gotten very good at building things, Simone. I hope you haven't forgotten how to be in them. He looked at her. She was looking at the street. Her profile in the December light, the burgundy dress, the straight dark hair. The particular quality of her stillness, which was not the stillness of someone who had nothing happening inside, but of someone who had learned to hold what was happening very quietly. Had you? He said. She was quiet for a moment. I don't know, she said. I think I was trying to remember. He nodded. They stood there in the cold for a while, not filling the silence, not rushing it, just letting it be what it was, which was two people, at the beginning of something that neither of them had a word for yet, and neither of them needed to name tonight. Inside, through the window, Loretta laughed at something Aldric had said. The sound of it carried clearly through the cold air, full and genuine and completely unguarded. He thought about the corner table, the cup of tea, the $20 left under the edge of a cup by a woman in a green coat who had been paying attention to something he had not known she was watching. He thought about the apron folded on the counter, the parking lot, the calculator that ran all night and never came out even. He thought about Aldric's voice on the phone saying, "I remembered the sound," and meaning the guitar, meaning the Sunday mornings, meaning I was never as far from you as you thought. He was 32 years old. He had been doing this alone for a long time. And standing on this porch, in this cold, with this woman beside him, and his son's laughter incense coming through the window, and a job that asked things of him that he was actually built to give, he thought, this is what the other side of it feels like, not the end of the hard parts. He knew better than that. There would be more hard parts. There would always be more. That was not pessimism. It was just the shape of a life, the honest accounting of it. But this was also a shape. This warmth, this company, this porch. He picked up his coffee. It had gone slightly cold. He drank it anyway. The training program, he said. She turned slightly. What about it? When it's ready. When I've built it into something real. I want to name it after a principle, not a person. He looked at the street. Something simple. Something that just says, when you see someone who needs help, you stop. She was quiet for a moment. That's it, she said. That's it. She looked at him. That quality of attention again. Full and direct, and without the professional distance that usually accompanied it. Okay, she said. Simple as that. Okay. Loretta appeared in the doorway behind them. Looked at the two of them standing at the railing. Said nothing. Just smiled the smile of a woman who had been right about something important and had the particular grace not to say so out loud. She went back inside. They stayed on the porch a little longer. The cold, the quiet street. The lights in the windows of the houses where other people were inside, living their Sunday evenings, all of them with their own weight, their own gaps, their own long calculations, that never quite came out even. And in a house with a porch and a wreath on the door, a man who had lost a job for stopping to help a stranger stood in the December air, and understood something he had always known but never had the language it for, the obvious next thing. That was all it ever was. You saw someone who needed help, and you stopped. Not because you knew what would come from it, not because you had calculated the return, but because it was the obvious next thing to do. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes that choice became the first line of a story you could not have written for yourself, a story that took you somewhere you had not known you were trying to reach. He had not known. He knew now, and that was enough. That was, in the end, exactly enough.